Welcome to Smart to Fish Wild, a podcast where a passion for the outdoors meets the strategy of building a meaningful, well-designed life. I'm Mark Candler, Colorado native, outdoorsman, passionate fly fisherman, proud father, and senior partner of Silver Oak Wealth Planning. Each week, I have the real pleasure of sitting down with some amazing people who are turning their passion into purpose and designing lives that leave room for what matters the most. Today, I'm joined by Greg Brown, partner at Sensiba LLP. This episode explores the interesting connection between fly fishing, strategic thinking, and high-level business decision-making. So sit back and enjoy the conversation, and I hope you find value. So, Greg, an honor to host you. Thanks for being a part of this.
The pleasure's all mine, Mike. Thanks for the invitation. Appreciate it.
Yeah. So, I just kind of wanted to start out and ask you, what's the number one benefit that fly fishing has brought to your business and your personal life?
Yeah, that's kind of an easy one. It's really just a place that I can go to get away from the noise and to really think and to really just get away from all the hustle and bustle and all the things that steal time. And so I think fly fishing is kind of an excuse to go out and be in nature and be in the quiet and really, I don't want to say isolate, but be separated from the normal day to day so that I can really think and sort out stuff in my head with respect to what I'm trying to do or what goals I'm trying to accomplish. And so it's interesting because sometimes you want to go out there and catch fish and you're really focused on that. And in other days, you might be a little bit distracted with what's happening maybe in family or personal life or business or practice building, whatever the case may be. So sometimes it's more kind of a vision quest, for lack of a better term. I fish a lot solo, but when you go with friends, that's a completely different ballgame. But that's fun as well. But there's also could be some time where you can get away and really sort things out. I have done my best thinking and probably made the most significant decisions of my life near a trout stream. Some good, some not so good, but it really allows me the peace to sit there and really kind of sort stuff out. So I can bring those things that I learn and I can organize those and I bring them back to my office and write them down. Most of the time when I'm out, I don't write anything down. I just think about stuff and bring it back and pencil that out or use pencil and paper like I do now. I still do that or use a whiteboard when whiteboards were a thing. And now it's usually I sit down with something electronic and just type up what I'm thinking and organize my thoughts that way. So it's true. It's some of my best ideas, I think, have come from those times where I just kind of sat and had conversations with myself and kind of sorted things out.
Yeah, that's easy for me to understand. I used to go fly fish by myself in high school and college. After a rough week or something negative happened, it just would clean me out and cleanse me and good to go. So I recall from our previous conversation that you made one of the best business decisions you've ever made when you were hip deep in water in Montana about forming a venture capital firm.
Yeah, so this is an interesting story. This is actually around 1998. At the time of my life, I was working, I had just come to the firm that I'm in now, but I had a couple of other firms that I was in before. And at this point in time, life was getting serious for me. I was married. My first child was born, and I needed to get serious about my career. I was riding my mountain bike, wasn't fishing that much. I really wasn't introduced to fly fishing, so maybe about 5 years. Or sorry, that's a do-over. I wasn't really introduced to fly fishing probably about it was 97, probably about 5 years before that, I would say. And the way the story goes is that my wife has two sisters, one of which married a guy here in California, and they moved to Bozeman, Montana. And 5 years before, I was like, Bozeman, I don't really want to go there. What's there? My kids wanted to see the cousins, etc. And I was like, I just want to get dragged along. And then I discovered fly fishing, and then I figured out where Bozeman was, and I was thinking about every excuse to go to Bozeman. And so the way that program would work was we would get to Bozeman and the kids would go off with their cousins and do cousin stuff like go to barbecues, go to art class, go to the lake and all that stuff. And grab my flag here and head off, and met some people out there. And there was one particular day where I was going to make partner, and at the time we were on a eat what you kill model, which basically means you get paid. And I'm sure Mark, you're familiar with this comp model, is you get paid based upon the client work that you bring in. Well, I didn't have any clients at the time, so I was wondering how this is all going to work. So I went to Bozeman, and I was on vacation, and normally I can switch things off and just go on vacation and fish. So this was a morning in the summer, and I got in my truck and I was driving out from Bozeman east out to Big Timber to go fish the Boulder River. And it was raining. And I'm from California. So when it rains in California in the summer, which is maybe like 5 times in my entire life has ever rained in California in the summer. And if it does, it's just a cloud going by and it's no big deal. Well, I wasn't in California. I was in Montana. So I got about 20 miles down the road and figured out I had forgotten my jacket. And I was like, well, okay, it's too far for me to go back. And this is probably just a cloud that's going to go by anyway. So I got out to the fishing spot and parked my car and made it down to the river. And I was in my head, I was just so wound up with, okay, I'm going to make partner. I don't have any clients. And what am I going to do? And how's this going to work? And people are talking to me about investment partnerships. And I'm hearing the marketplace ask for certain types of services. And I knew the people that were providing these services. So this is all going in my head, and I'm casting these hoppers, and these rainbows are rolling on it, and I'm missing them because I'm just not focused. And I can still see this fish, 30 years later, I can still see this big fish just roll this wide. I missed him because I just got frustrated, and this was going on, and it was cold, and I was wet, and it was raining. And I said to myself, okay, look, man, it's like, why don't you either work or fish, but you can't do both. So I sat down on this little sandbar. I was a little frustrated. I put my rod down. I put my vest down. I didn't have, there was iPhones didn't exist. I had a Palm Pilot, but I didn't have it with me. And so I just kind of sat there and thought about stuff. And I said, why don't we start off with this investment partnership / venture capital tax and audit practice? Why don't you figure that out and go do that? I probably sat there for about 20 or 30 minutes, I forget, formulated some thoughts in my head, and just basically just kind of put it in this mental box and just said, okay, now you're on vacation, just leave it there for the next, I don't know, week or 10 days, whatever it was, go back. So I went back to the office. I brought out a piece of paper and a pencil, and I wrote down all my ideas, and I wrote down kind of this draft business plan that I was going to implement. And I did it in pencil because I knew it was going to change and I wanted to be able to erase it. And so I started doing this. I started networking around it. I got one other person to help me with it. I'm a pretty good thinker, but I'm a horrible accountant. And so people are like, well, you're a tax guy. How could you? I don't math. I have people and machines for math. I just apply concepts. That's what I do. And so that's a different story. But I brought it back. Long story short, we worked really hard on this idea for about 10 years. We got a handful of clients that trusted us in Silicon Valley to do their venture capital funds. And for those that aren't familiar with that, it's basically people, partners that know certain industries will get together and they'll solicit money from their limited partners and say, give us your money and we're going to invest in these companies. And some of these companies are going to make it and some of them aren't. And we're going to give you a return and hopefully a lot more than that. And that's kind of how Silicon Valley works, at least for on the VC side, to just make it pretty simple. Back to the story, I came up with this strategy where we were going to serve venture capital firms. We were going to serve the partners or the general partners of those VC firms and their technology companies or their portfolio companies. The vast number of them are technology companies being in Silicon Valley. Fast forward to today, I think our budget today is like 90 million. I think the venture capital on the audit and the tax side is probably going to account for about 30 or 40 million of that 95 million. I don't have the numbers right. But the point being is that particular idea and from a help with a lot of people really, really ramped into something significant. So that was about 1998 is when this all happened. And I can humbly say that I was part of a team that was able to build something that's pretty significant. And so the technology practice is off on its own, and the venture capital practice is off on its own. Those are kind of our two main verticals in our firm at this point. So Yeah, it kind of goes back to what I said initially, getting away from the noise and being able to think and to be able to kind of organize your thoughts clearly and then go back and roll up your sleeves and go for it. So that's kind of how this all happened.
That's an awesome story. Thank you so much. So, what particular aspects of fly fishing do you think enable you to do that so well? Think so deeply, so strategically?
So many correlations between fit fly fishing and business. It's mind-boggling. It's interesting because preparing for this session, Mark, I was really thinking about how you go about catching fish, kind of the different kind of progressions that you go through as a fly fisher. As with any skill, you start out just thinking about fly fishing. First thing that I was concerned about was not dying, learn how to wade, learn how to just get around in a safe fashion. Um, then focusing on the basics. How do you do a decent cast? How do you tie basic knots? How do you pick a decent fly? And learning all the basic types of things, and then you get into the more advanced things of fly fishing. Reading the water, where are the fish going to be? Where's the sun? What's the weather doing? Um, is it cloud cover? Is it a sunny day? Can you see the bottom? All these things, and then you start forgetting about tying knots, and you forget about waiting, but you're not as focused on it. And you're really focused on the river. You're watching and you're observing and you're seeing and you're thinking and you're planning and you're adjusting and you're strategizing. It's like, oh, I see this deep green slot over there. Okay, that's great, but this isn't producing. But I just saw this fish rise over there. What is it eating? Right. So a lot of the things like that, when in my business as a tax consultant, you learn the basics of your craft or of your skill. And then once you learn certain things, then you understand your marketplace, which is your river, your stream. You start to read the marketplace. What are asking for? AKA, what are the fish eating? What do they want? How do they want to see it? Presentation is tremendously important when you're talking to clients and prospective clients. What are their issues? And how do you explain it to in a way them take complicated topics and explain them in ways that not only they can understand but resonate with them. This is because I'm not in the business of letting people know how smart I am. I'm in the business of taking their fact pattern or what is concerning them and helping them understand it and me crafting a response back to them either in writing or verbally that really breaks down what they need to help them. And that's kind of like catching fish. The fish doesn't really care how smart you are. The fish is pretty simple with respect to when they're going to eat something. So a lot of the same types of uh, approaches to a trout stream preparation, especially if you go on more of a wilderness type fishing trip, you spend a lot of time thinking about it. What gear do we need to bring? Lots of times you're bringing multiple rods and reels because, if you're 100 miles from anywhere, you forget something, that's kind of a big deal. I mean, you can't just go get it. So in business, you have to be preparing. I don't like to walk into meetings when I'm not prepared. I mean, that's just not a good thing. So lots of preparing, lots of thinking ahead of what anticipating questions, anticipating what a client might need. And so it's really the amount of parallels to fly fishing and my business is vast. I mean, there's so many.
Oh, that was awesome. That was so well articulated. Really appreciate it. So, what's your theory on the best ways to improve your performance, improve yourself?
Best way to improve yourself? I'll say it this way. Get to the place where you can honestly sit by yourself without a phone in your hand, without a screen in front of you, and listen to what you are saying to yourself, especially after a failure, especially after a challenge, especially after something hard. Listen to yourself, not be distracted. Try that. And once you kind of get open and honest, I had to learn how to not be so hard on myself because going back to the stream for a minute, you could go out there and you could go like 8 for 10, right? Eight hookup, you get 10 hookups, you land 8 of them. That's pretty phenomenal. If you're steel hitting, if you go like 30%, you're probably doing pretty good. But the one fish that you miss or the one that gets off and the one that you do something stupid, like, last time I was down in the Gulf fishing for reds, this one big bull just bucked on me and just broke me off. I was like, was a phenomenal day, but I was upset at myself because it was just a stupid mistake, right? Well, mistakes happen, so I've had to learn to be, a little easier on myself. But being being a being a continuous learner, listening to people that are around you, listening to people that have your best interest in mind, build trust with people, and listen to them. I have 2 ears and 1 mouth, you know? I like to get around people that are smarter than me, that are better than me, that are more skilled than I am on whatever it is, so I can learn from them. That is a way to, accelerate learning and just be curious, unpack stuff. Back when I started in public accounting, a very long time ago, I don't wanna say the last century, but it was the last century. I have to be careful around young people because when I start talking about times and dates, they go, "Holy cow, how old is this guy?" Right? I used to, back in the day before the internet, we had rotary phones. If I saw something during the day that I didn't quite understand, I would take out a piece of paper and a pencil and I would write down the question. I would go home and I would study it. I would learn what it was. And I was just curious about stuff that I didn't know that I felt I should know. I don't know obviously everything. I tell people I'm not an expert in everything, but I'm an expert in some things. I hold myself out to be a pretty good tax consultant. So I make it my purpose to know those aspects of tax. But yeah, just be inquisitive and talk to people and listen. Listening is super important.
Very good advice. So, how do you create opportunities?
How do I create opportunities? It's deep. You go out and you talk to people. That's how you make opportunities. When I talk to people, depending on where I am and what I'm doing, I learned this from my father. My father was a salesperson, a salesman, if I could say that, back in the 50s. And he was a very outgoing person and he would talk to everybody. And so I kind of have this, I don't know if you call it a gift, but I can talk to just about anybody in just about any situation. And I would say probably about 90% of the people that you talk to will actually talk to you if you know how to talk. So you create opportunities by talking to people about what they want to talk about. And so I put my phone in my pocket. If you want to connect with people, put your phone in your pocket or leave it in your car. I know this might be like, oh, you can't do that. You can do that. I used to turn my phone off on weekends. I would just turn it off. Just power the thing down. I didn't get an iPhone until what? I don't remember when the iPhones came out. It was probably in the mid 90s or something like this. I should know this, but I lived a good portion of my life, probably half of my life without an iPhone. I didn't have a laptop for quite a while. It's like, how in the world did we survive? We did just fine. So, yeah, talk to people. I love to talk stories. So, it was about 3 years ago. I went to the Gallatin River near Big Sky. I rented this little Airbnb single room cabin on the side of the Gallatin River, and I was just sitting there and I was fishing. And I was, I hadn't been to Big Sky in quite a few years. So I was a little intimidated because I'd heard all these stories about Californians going to Montana and all the Silicon Valley guys buying up the waterfront on the Madison and all the wars over there about easements. We don't have river access. We don't like California as well. I drive my car with all my fly gear to Big Sky, Montana with this big fat California license plate. And I was kind of like, all right, here we go. I
Here
hope
we
I
are.
okay. And so I go into Big Sky and I'm kind of, head on a swivel. And I went into this one restaurant and I used to being, a single guy, I would eat at the restaurant bars because I didn't have to wait and I didn't want to, eat by myself. So I would eat at the restaurant bars. And I could typically find somebody to talk to. But when I went to Montana, everybody was super nice and they were super outgoing and they were super friendly. And one thing I noticed, nobody had their phones on the bar. If you go to California, everybody's either staring at their phones or they have them on the bar in case that all important text message from your neighbor that your dog got at or something. I don't know. They're just connected to their phones. So I go to Montana and I'm talking to the locals. We're talking about all this kind of stuff. And then invariably they would get to the question, well, where are you from? And my response was, do I have to tell you? And then and then I tell them, oh yeah, I'm from California. God forbid I would tell them I'm from the San Francisco Bay Area, and that was enough. I never really got that far. I just said I was from California, and so I met so many cool people, and some cool opportunities came out of that, which I'm still thinking about some of those today. That was like 3 years ago, whatever. So yeah, just get out and talk to people on the river. I learned a lot of stuff. I mean, I learned some really cool things from the locals up in the Gallatin Gateway. It was pretty fun.
Awesome. Awesome. So who are the one or two people you admired most in fly fishing that were your mentors?
So okay, so I'll tell you a couple of stories since I'm a storyteller. So I'll tell you a couple of stories. Yeah, I understand for you, Mark. We only had a couple of conversations, but you were hanging out at Bud the Lilies way back in the day, right? In West Yellowstone. So when I first started going up into West Yellowstone, on the way to the Madison or the Henry's Fork or where we were going inside the park, we would we would go down, into West Yellowstone, and I wandered into blue ribbon flies, and I didn't know anything. I had my Sage, 4-piece 5-weight rod that my wife got me with this scientific angler kind of plasticky reel thing with some Dacron backing, and I figured out how to tie a nail knot and get the fly line on there. I didn't know up from down. I got a brand new waders and boots and all this stuff, and I go wandering into blue ribbon flies, and I'm just kind of looking around the shop and looking at the fly table and looking at all this stuff hanging on the walls. Later, figured out it's all the fly tying supplies and stuff. This gentleman walks up to me and greets me and kind of shows me around a little bit. And I don't remember the questions, but it was probably like, what's dubbing, or what are all those notes on that little whiteboard behind the counter? What do those all mean? Nymphs and dries and whatever. That's how bad it was. So I had a conversation. He was really nice. I don't know. I always like to buy stuff when I get information from people. So I bought, I don't know. And I left. And I think it was a couple of months later, I was sitting down and reading some fly fishing magazine, newspaper, or something. And the guy that helped me was Craig Matthews, who I didn't know Craig Matthews from the Man on the Moon. I didn't know what such an icon he was at the time. Watching him over the years and just kind of what the amazing dude he is. And that's the only time I've ever met him. So that was one guy that I admired. It was in fly fishing because he's really a conservationist as well. He's a hunter and he likes to fish, and great dude. The other guy I really looked up to when I really learned how to fly fish was a local guy here out in California that I had met through one of my business partners, who was the guy that it really kind of got me into fly fishing. And the guy that taught me how to fish was a guy named Mike Costello. Mike Costello is a guy that lives in Lodi, California, and he used to float us down kind of the lower section of the Stanislaus River in California, where they had some pretty good rainbows. And this was a place where I could leave my house in the morning and drive to Oakdale in about 2.5 hours, float about 10-mile section, and get back in my car and drive back home and get home by about 6 or 7 o'clock, something like that, like a random Wednesday or whatever. Costello was he was big. He was probably about, he wasn't tall. He was probably about 5'10" or 11, but he was, I mean, biggest legs I've ever seen, big arms. And it was the first time I was introduced to how do you back row a run, right? So when you start whacking them and maybe get a couple of nice ones or maybe miss a few, he would go back right up to the top. I got another buddy of mine who's on the Umpqua River in Central Oregon, and we steelhead up there, and he's got a motor on his drip boat. So I don't know why Costello didn't have a motor on his, but he would back row these things, and this dude would row it like 5 or 6 times in a row until this thing would absolutely dead. So, but the thing about Costello is that if you missed a set, he wasn't happy. And God forbid if you threw one of his nice streamers in the bush. I just remember, throwing one in the trees and snapping it off. And it was like, man, this is not going to be good. I mean, so
Don't
I
want to mess
learned
with that guy.
probably not the best way to learn how to fish. It's kind of like, taking your kid out on his first road ride, and just burying him. It's like, okay, go easy on him. You want him to come back. But for some reason, I was learning enough from Mike that I stuck with it for a while. So when I got around regular guides, I was fine. He was a pretty demanding guy, but he taught me a lot. He taught me
That's
a lot.
awesome. Great story. Great story. So yeah, what are the things about conservation that are most important to you?
Conservation. Yeah, it's really about stewardship. It's about understanding, that not to get too philosophical about this, but we're really interested for the time that we're here on this planet to really have a responsibility towards the resources that we enjoy, to manage them, to get involved, to advocate for our resources, and really just do what we can to make sure that our streams are clear, our forests are managed properly, our wildlife are managed properly, so that not only ourselves, but our kids and others can really enjoy the resources that we have. I think regretfully, just in my short time, I've seen fisheries that I've actually seen two fisheries that have been decimated just because of I would say, it's a tough one, partially regulation not being where they should be, and just not managing the resource correctly. So I'm in my 60s. I know I look young. I'm in my 60s, and we used to go to places up in Northern California. We would just catch monsters. Everything was over 20 inches in California, and we went back up to this secret spot. This particular group I was a part of was about 3 or 4 other guys, and they took a risk on me. It's like, okay, this guy, we don't know. If you want to take you can. Another buddy of mine, the tech guy who worked at a software company, I met him. Like, well, he's a really good guy. You should bring him along. He can take care of himself. And and he actually gave me an audition. The ringleader of this group took me out on this creek and spent a half a day with him. It was kind of like an audition for a movie or something. Like, well, did I make the cut? Well, apparently I did. And we would go up there, and it's just this phenomenal fishery. It was like this big secret. Well, somehow the secret got out, and we went up there a couple years later, and it was pretty decimated. Education's a part of it, you know, and just really being smart about the resources that we're blessed to be able to enjoy. I currently live next to uh, a big piece of land that a logging company owns. I won't mention any names, but I am just starting to wade out into, no pun intended, into this whole world of logging. And I'm having a lot of conversations with these logging guys. It's kind of like talking with someone on the other team. You don't want to tell them everything, but you want to kind of coexist so you can kind of have mutual benefit from the relationship. And so I'm kind of talking with these guys about, certain trees and other things. And I'm kind of looking out over here. We got some trees that probably need some attention and this and that. And me not being wound up about some of the logging that they're doing in the area. And so getting involved with people and having grown up conversations about stuff that matters to you. And I'm sure there's a time and place to run up and down the street with your sign in your hand and yelling and screaming and honking your horns in your cars. And that's all great. And I've held signs on corners before, but at the same time, I'm getting a little more involved with more structured conversations about certain things and getting involved with organizations that are not necessarily advocacy or activism. More, all right, let's make change in the capacity that we can. And so, huge believer in the fact that make small changes, do what you can do, and you'll make an impact. So just do something.
That's awesome. I admire your theory. That is very cool. Thanks for spending time with us today on Smart to Fish Wild. I hope today's conversation resonated and gave you something to think about. Please consider sharing this episode with other people who you think might find value. Until next time, get smart so you can fish wild.